Well, thank you, Mr. McAleese, for sponsoring this important conference, and for all the joint teammates, industry partners, and members of Congress and their staff. Thanks for attending, especially the early part. Okay, Army Futures Command. We are charged by the Secretary of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army with transforming the Army to ensure future war-winning readiness. Transforming the Army, the purpose is to ensure future war-winning readiness. I get asked that question a lot. Let me take a couple seconds. So transformation is a bigger and more ambitious effort than modernization. Modernization is absolutely essential. It is critical, but we need soldiers, we need leaders, we need the ability to train the new capabilities, the facilities that translates new kit, new equipment into actual capability and lethality in our formations. So AFC is accountable for transforming the Army. So that is my job as the commander of AFC. Fortunately, we got a great team inside and outside of AFC. And I'll start with ASALT. The Honorable Bush and his team are phenomenal teammates. We work closely together. We will succeed or fail together. So AFC generating requirements, it would be stupid of me to not be paying attention to what the people that are going to acquire that stuff. So working together, left side, clear, consistent requirements, and then continuing to work as the acquisition community delivers that to make sure we get what we need. And there's a lot of other teammates involved in this. I'll start with my teammates at TRADOC, Army Training and Doctrine Command, who is accountable for things like doctrine, our new organizations, leader development, ForceCom and General Pappas down at Army Forces Command, and our ASCC commanders around the world, General Flynn, General Williams. That's where the warfighting expertise of the Army resides, in our warfighting formations. And what's also interesting is, in my opinion, some of the best innovation that's happening in our Army is happening out in formations, right? I like to say that the closer you are to getting shot, the better you are at innovating. So we're trying to leverage that, not in a territorial way. And then AMC, Army Material Command, Representative Whitman mentioned it, just having capability without capacity isn't gonna be real helpful, right? So General Daly and his team are on this, and they're the ones who are going to turn capability into genuine capacity and lethality. All the ASCC commanders, the joint force, the Army doesn't do anything outside the joint force, right? That's how we fight. So staying nested with our joint teammates, because really, I think the ultimate metric is, are we providing combatant commanders with the capabilities they need, and our land component commanders with the capability they need? We got industry partners, can't do that, big and small, without them. And then last but not least, the oversight and support of Congress. So transformation, modernization, plus a lot of other stuff to translate new equipment into genuine capability and lethality in our formations. And future war-winning readiness is exactly that. We're the best land force in the world right now. And we want to stay that way in 2030, 2040, every single night between now and then, right? Trained and ready, lethal, cohesive teams that can dominate the land force. We want to deter. I think credible deterrence absolutely has to include credible land forces, right? Our enemies need to believe that fighting is not going to come out in their interests. And then if deterrence does fail, the land forces, the United States Army, absolutely has to be able to dominate the land domain and control land in support of our joint force and joint teammates. So AFC, three priorities that we've been given. The first one is people. People, our number one asymmetric advantage in the United States Army, and I would offer the Joint Force, but in the Army is indisputably our people. The all-volunteer force, our non-commissioned officer corps, the quality and quantity of leaders and commanders that we can generate, all underpinned by good, hard, tough, realistic training. So whatever we do as we transform the Army, we have to preserve that. We have to sustain our people as our asymmetric advantage. Next priority, deliver the Army of 2030. Deliver the Army of 2030. So, and I'll talk about 2040 in a second, but no change to AFC's responsibilities, right? We are still running requirements through AFC. I am still accountable for the delivery of Army 2030 in accordance with all our ongoing plans. All of our signature efforts are on track. Thanks to my predecessor, General Murray, and his team. AFC's been around almost 5 years now, laid all that good groundwork, and we have a great team at ASALT led by Honorable Bush, his predecessors. We are on track with Army modernization. AFC continues to work with ASALT every day to make sure that these transition requirements into actual capability that our units need, right? And candidly, we need to be going faster. It's going well, and we need to continue to move at the speed of combat. So AFC is laser focused on 2030, not walking away from now to 2030, no change to our modernization priorities. We continue to learn, watch what's going on in the world, watch what's happening with the threat, so we can't just execute a plan. We need to be adaptive now to 2030. Cross-functional teams, some of you are familiar with that. The one thing that is indisputably the Army got right with AFC, in my opinion, is cross-functional teams. We stood up teams of superstars, right? So clearly identify a problem, scope it, and dogpile talent on that problem to solve it, right? And these are one of the absolute reasons that we're having success so far. They're not going anywhere. In fact, we're looking at opportunities, or there are things that we should probably add a CFT or two based on one, the success of the ones we have, but also some emerging problem sets that have kind of come up over the last 4 or 5 years. The reason that they've been so good, I think, is because of the support they've received from across the military and also for Congress. So our CFTs are empowered to interact and speak on behalf of the Army and interact with industry. They're doing that very well. They're accountable to Congress, so CFT leaders, briefing staffers, and interacting has been a big part of that success. The subject matter experts can meet with Congress and their staff whenever we're at the convenience, obviously, to provide regular updates and ensure that the funding, right, because nobody has enough money, right? So the accountability that the funding we do get ends up as actual capability and lethality down in our formations. And like I said, the great thing about the CFTs is we can adapt them. So we loaded them, for example, here's 3 to 5 things we'd like you to solve, requirements. They start turning into programs that we can transition to ASALT, right? So the PEOs, PMs can run with that. Now we're in the process of saying, what are the 3 to 5 things that we want to reload? You know, what would you do next? Stay ahead of it. And like I mentioned, I do think there's a couple opportunities to continue to build on that by adding those. And all of that is underpinned by real rigorous analytics, our experiment program, Project Convergence, and a continuous, persistent experimentation that'll identify those opportunities. And like I said, if all we do, and don't get me wrong, modernization, absolutely essential, critical. We have to do it. But if all we do is modernize our equipment, then we're not going to end up with capability and war-winning land forces that we need. We need new adaptive training, leader development, not just the technical aspects of things like the STE, but actually how we train, where we're going to train. We have to adjust all that. I think how tragic it would be if we actually add all this new capability and we don't have the ability to train with it effectively. So what does a multi-domain operation training complex? What's the NTC version of cyberspace, right? So we are accountable for adding all that and the new equipment, which goes back to my point at the beginning. AFC, I've been charged, the AFC team's been charged with transforming the Army, right? Modernizing and transforming the Army. So I feel very good about that. I think we got a good team together, phenomenal relationship. The Honorable Bush will talk later today. Hope he says the same thing. But from my standpoint, positive relationship, everybody's giving away together for our Army, for the Joint Force. Because of that success, we're not done yet, but we got good momentum in the Army on our modernization. We've been consistent. We haven't moved requirement documents around. We have good support. Can't take our eye off the ball. Got to follow through. But because we're on track now to 2030, it's created an opportunity for Army Futures Command and the Army to start thinking and working a little bit harder on what comes next. What's the Army of 2040 looks like? Not stop doing 30, do 40, right? Deliver 2030, but let's start thinking about what the future war is going to look like. Because that's our other major responsibility, design the Army of 2040. So people, deliver 2030, design 2040. And if you think about it, there's not an exact parallel, but if you think about the Army of Desert Storm, 90s, phenomenal Army. The thinking, the experimenting, the analysis, the hard professional debating of that Army happened in the late 70s. So that's my point. 2040, before everybody's eyes glaze over, 2040, we need a sense of urgency about next. War is changing rapidly. We got problems. We got a good enemy. If he has his way, his capacity's going up. Chasing them on magazine depth and things like that is a way. I would offer that we have the ability in industry, academia, and our joint force to outthink the enemy and see what's coming, see what the next big evolutions and revolutions in warfare are, and be there first. So that's the passion behind 2040. Couple things just to put in a little bit of context. The soldiers of 2040 are alive right now. I mean, they're born, they're human beings, including my almost 1-year-old grandson who turns 18 in 2040, in case you're wondering whether I got any extra incentive to get that right. But the leaders of 2040 are in the Army now. They're already in the Army. So whoever's doing this in 2040 is running around Fort Benning somewhere, going to Ranger School, figuring out to be an infantry armor, or maybe not. Maybe they're running around Fort Huachuca or Fort Gordon. But they are absolutely in the Army now. And when I say 2040, what I am talking about is a fully fielded capability in the Army in 2040, which ambitiously would mean we would have to be full up fielding by 2035. I mean, absolutely. It'd be aggressive to do it in 5 years, but let's say 5 years of full up fielding. Anything we're going to field and put in the Army in 35 probably needs to actually exist by 30. Prototype, low rate production, it can't be something we're trying to figure out how to do. And we're in the process of palming 29 right now. So I'm not talking 2040 as some ethereal science fiction thing out in the future. I'm talking about 18 to 24 months for all of us to work together, right? Work together and figure out that critical second and third FIDEP. So 30 to 35, 35 to 40. There's big bets, big decisions, big opportunities that if we inject a shot of brains into that, I believe we can get ahead of our adversaries very easily. And that's why the Army operating concept for 2040 nested with the joint warfighting concept for 2040 is a absolutely essential task for AFC, and that's why it's one of our priorities. So I'm still green. So transform the Army to ensure war-winning readiness. Make sure we get people right. To include, I'm absolutely certain that there are job skills, branches, MOSs, things we don't even have in the Army yet. You know, the data warriors, just, you know, we need to figure that out because we have to add capability, and you can't grow non-commissioned officers and majors and colonels, right? Ensure war-winning readiness, prioritize our people, no change. AFC is absolutely accountable for delivering the Army of 2030, working with a whole bunch of teammates, and then designing the Army of 2040 and making sure, maybe not to get it exactly right, but not to get it really wrong, and have the adaptability when we see what we got wrong to correct faster than our adversaries. Deliver 2030, that kind of takes you left to right, fast, adaptive, watch what's going on in the world. Like I said, I think we need to get to a 2 to 3 year from the time we see something till it's actually a capability in a formation. You can't go really fast or you end up with kit without leaders and training opportunities. Design the Army of 2040. I think we got to learn better and adapt faster. I think those should be characteristics of the joint force and the Army force going. And then most importantly, never losing sight of the superpowers we have, and that's our human beings, our men and women, underpinned by tough, realistic training that makes us the best Army and the best joint force in the world. So thanks for a chance to come out today and explain a little bit of that, and I am standing by for questions.
Can I throw up a question?
Of course.
There's been a lot of confusion over deliver design 2040. If you had 100% of your day, right, what's the ratio of time that we should think about you're spending on the 2030 versus the time of 2040? And secondly, when should we expect your next project convergence?
Yeah, that's two good questions. I know a lot of you have served and been in the military. You know, I've been blessed to kind of grow up in the warfighting commanding side of the Army. So when you talk about main effort, one of the fundamental things is you can shift it, right? So to answer your question specifically, probably 55%, 20-40, 45%. Just because if I said 49-51, it wouldn't sound much of a weighting. But let me be clear though, that's only because we're on track and 2030 is going good. If something comes off the rails on 2030, I'll jump back into that in about a second. And fortunately, you know, it's not like I have 29,000 people that I got to figure out which one they're doing, right? So DevCom, our research, our academic partnerships, our R&D, S&T is more in the 2040 space. And then our CFTs are following through, working with ASALT, PMs and PEOs to actually deliver. Project Convergence, if you're familiar with that, it is the Army's primary experiment. We didn't cancel that or stop that either. So persistent experimentation. So we did PC-22, and within a month, I can't go into the details, but we saw something fascinating out of Monterey as a joint force and said, that's really interesting. And within 30 days, we went down to Yuma, did a live fire, White Sands, and validated that what we learned was something actual, right? So it's a persistent experiment. In February, 2 or 3 months later, linked up with General Kurilla and General Donahue, who were running an exercise, inserted experimentation objectives in it, learning objectives, and learned from that. So we're doing something about every month, weighted toward the Pacific, a little bit with NATO, CENTCOM, Homeland, right? Trying to Homeland, integrating. I'm more interested in getting learning objectives into existing funded and resourced exercises and learning from that. And then we'll spiral up and do a big capstone Project Convergence. The next one tentatively, I feel pretty confident it'll be spring of '24. Spring of '24, less than a year from now. But the thing is, if you just do them for doing them, they're expensive, they're costly. If you don't take the time to do the analytics of the last big one you did, and then shape your objectives for the next one, so you can actually go a little faster than is useful. But project convergence, persistent experimentation, and then spiral up for capstones probably once every 12 to 18 months.
Yes, sir.
General, we have a question over here.
Hi, General. Jen Jensen with Defense News.
Hey, Jen.
Okay. Oh, there we go. That's very loud. So we talked a lot about contested logistics. There's a whole annex in the new doctrine about it. I'm wondering from Army Futures Command perspective how you are organizing yourself around developing the requirements that you need for contested logistics. You know?
Yeah, well, it's a gigantic problem, especially in the priority theater. So organizing for it. So the secretary and the chief have given some guidance. I'd say it's a partnership between Army Material Command and Army Futures Command. So General Daly and his team are looking at the strategic aspects of that. Army Futures Command is along with TRADOC at CASCOM, are leaning into the tactical implications of that, and then we have a overlap in the operational space. But it's a wicked problem. I mean, we got to get the industrial base to actually make this stuff. It's going to take the joint force to secure operational lines of communication, and then down at the division, you know, division is a decisive action, decisive element. Getting that right to the rifle squad and we absolutely have to improve along all three places. Although increasing lethality and survivability of deployable formations is equally important. You know, technology, you know, think about our heavier formations. They're about protection, off-road mobility, lethality, right? You look at what's going on with technology. We have an opportunity to inject massive amounts of lethality and protection into our lighter formations, which are already more strategically deployable, right? Then at the same time, we're absolutely going to need to drop the weight and logistic tail of our heavier formations. We indisputably need a heavy portion of our Army, but the weight's got to come down and the log tail's got to tighten up. So that's a long answer, but I hope that helps.
General, thank you. On behalf of the audience, I'd like to say, Gary, great job. I think we have the chief next, so we're looking forward to hear what he says. Let's have a round of applause.